I know. I was going to share it when it goes up.
Oh, okay. Just you're in the screen like you were last time.
Sorry, I'll be done as soon as it.
We get a half Orion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, everyone.
Let's reload. Hey, so Facebook looks like it's going.
Oh, wait.
There we go. Yep.
Yep, that's going. We can keep an eye on that. And YouTube. Is going as well. It actually worked first time this week. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, that's going. Okay. So while we now give people a chance to say hello on YouTube, and make sure you mute everything, otherwise we end up with and YouTube. Last week.
Nice feedback.
Where's the mute button? There it is. Okay.
And
that's going too. Okay. But I want it on Zoom so I can see you guys. There we go. Sweet. So, what's the most fun thing you did today?
I went on a run.
Ooh.
That's very dangerous.
That sort of fun is in the eye of the beholder.
Yes, I would say that.
Like, why did you do that? Were you being chased?
I know I usually don't like running, but I've become a little bit fond of it in this season. Mostly because afterwards you just feel better, but the during part is still just as unbearable. But the after part is like, okay, I accomplished something. I moved my body. My mind is a little more clear.
There you go.
What about you, Dylan? What did you guys do? That was fun.
I think the most fun was our podcast recording.
yeah.
That was fun. Recording the podcast and going from room to room, trying to avoid the noises that were around our
That was funny.
apartment.
Yeah.
It'd be great. And then Ryan's just been working on his thesis, which is a different kind of fun.
Oh, I'm sure.
Getting it done.
Oh, yeah, real blast.
Richard, what was one fun thing you did?
Well, I went for a nice walk where it was kind of dappled cloud, and so it wasn't too hot. And yeah, I could just meander through the fields reading Samuel, ready for tonight. So
Yeah, that does sound like fun.
yeah, it's just so nice out. So we'll have to keep an eye on people joining us. I can see a few people. So just to encourage, if you're watching, we'd love you to say hi. We'd love you to join in. We can't hear your voice, but we can, pick up your comments and questions, and hopefully people have been reading along with us, which would be really awesome. And so last week we kind of bragged on Hannah quite a bit, didn't we?
Yes.
At the beginning of the story, which is really cool. But we did chapter 1. So yeah, Bibles to the ready. And we'll see if we can manage more than a chapter. Although I'm not in a rush.
Yeah.
It's such a good story. I kind of want to keep going with it. And so, yeah, there we go. So should we do like we did last time? Read a bit and then unpack it together. And
Yeah, that sounds
good.
great.
Let's do it.
I like that.
yeah, let's do that then. Okay, who's our first appointed reader? Oh, you know, before we start reading, I need to throw Tim Reed under the bus. So
Oh, that's right.
actually, we should introduce ourselves as well. We could do that. So I'm Richard, and I'm one of the pastors at Westside, one of the leaders. And our team, we are kind of like a house of learning team for Westside, which is all our adult learning. But also we run our college team. And well, we are the college team, in fact, minus a couple of people. And so that's me.
And I'm Molly, one of the leaders at Westside as well, on the college team, on the House of Learning team, dabble a bit everywhere, but excited to dive into Hannah with you guys.
Yeah.
I'm Amber.
Oh,
And I'm Ryan.
And I'm Ryan.
I just feel like this is supposed to be that back and
a
forth.
riff.
No. Yeah, we're both a part of the House of Learning team, and I'm officially a part of the school team, but we always joke that Ryan's the unofficial a part of the school team. Yeah, and it's been really fun to connect some of the different areas of Westside together and going through Samuel.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm Ryan. I'm a deacon for the House of Learning, and do some teaching for the college, and do a little bit of a lot of different things between the two teams.
And we're matching tonight, so this works.
Yeah, you guys have gone the whole. You look like you're ready to do an Apple presentation.
Awesome.
It's very
That's
West
awesome.
Side. Yeah.
That's true. Very West Side. It's
It's like we should be. Yeah. Just like it should be.
Yeah. Oh, just like it should be.
And then the person that I want to throw under the bus is, so Ryan's one of the deacons of House of Learning, and we have another one, which is Tim Reed, and he was supposed to join us last week, but had loads of family stuff going on, and he was like, I'm definitely going to do it. I'm going to do it tonight. And he just texted me a while ago, I went to In-N-Out. I didn't think it would take that long. And basically, he's eating a burger right now. So
An In-N-Out burger, no less.
it is an In-N-Out burger. And I want to shame him, but really it's jealousy speaking. That's what's going on.
Jealousy of the burger, not jealousy of the 2-hour line.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. My first response was, can I get a piece of that action? Yeah. And so that's the who's who. And we'll read a bit and comment and unpack it and discuss it. And we've already had some fun today because Ryan and Amber and I recorded this week's podcast, which was a blast.
Yes.
A nice, well, I was going to say fiery, but it really wasn't. A convivial debate about whether you can have communion with orange juice or water or wine or juice or etc. plus
All the
various
things.
related issues. So that'll be out on Friday. So yeah, looking forward to that one coming out. Right, who wants to read first?
I vote Ryan reads first.
Oh.
All right. there
All
we go.
right. Well, I'll read.
Looks like you're
let's see.
nominated.
We've got Hannah's prayer here. So this is fun. All right. Starting in chapter 2, verse 1. And Hannah prayed and said, my heart exults in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth derides my enemies, because I rejoice in your salvation. There is none holy like the Lord, for there is none besides you. There is no rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly. Let not arrogance come from your mouth. For the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty are broken, but the feeble bind on strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, but those who were hungry have ceased to hunger. The barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and he exalts. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful ones, but the wicked shall be cut off in darkness, for not by might shall a man prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed. Then Elkanah went home to Ramah, and the boy was ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli the priest.
Okay.
That's not part of the song.
No. That's a good place to stop. I was wondering if we didn't stop you, if we could just get you to keep reading, just see how far you would do.
Yes.
Probably. We'd be in Revelation in an hour, and we'd be like, we're not that soon. That would be a quick
A
read.
really long bedtime story.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So this is interesting. We talked about Hannah praying last week and how she's got some of the longest recorded prayers and the most prayer of a woman in the Old Testament recorded. And so here's another of her praying to the Lord. But this is the thanksgiving being poured out, which is cool. given what we learned about her last week.
Mm.
And so, Ed, was there anything that stood out to you guys about this, almost like a song?
Yeah.
In a sort of serious, sort of joking way, in verse 2, "There is no rock like our God," I'm just brought back to the old song, "There is no rock like our God." I'm not going to sing it, but there's an old song that is written around this, and it just brings that to mind. Makes me feel a little nostalgic. But yeah, this is a powerful prayer / song.
That is a powerful.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, right in verse 1, I was reading up on this idea of the horn, and this was just one of the critical commentaries had this to say, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts because this was new to me. But apparently, Eastern women, they would wear like a horn on their forehead to suspend the veil, and those who couldn't bear children would wear it pretty low on their head. And then once they became mothers, it would get raised a few inches on their head. So like this picture of my horn is lifted high is like a very physical representation of the Lord lifting her horn in such a way that she has now like carries the maternal characteristics of one who bears children, which I thought was really interesting. I don't know if you guys had ever heard that before, or if that's just like one
cool
commentary's opinion, but yeah.
Yeah, I'd never heard that before. So that's a new one on me. That's cool.
Yeah.
I like the because she's gone from someone who her public persona was one of being provoked and ridiculed and ostracized.
Mm-hmm.
And her public perception was of someone who appeared like a tragic drunk. At least that was Eli's perception of her, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, like the perception of her is of this honorable mother, and it's this kind of transformation in her life, which a load of this prayer actually is about this kind of transformation, like contrasting the proud and the humble. It especially around like verse 5, it made me really think of the Beatitudes. Like those who were full, who were satisfied and thought, I've got everything. Now they're having to like hire themselves out just to get food. So they've gone from like boasting to being laid low. But those who are hungry are not hungering anymore. And so I don't know, it just reminds me of the Beatitudes, where you've got this, the people who think they're full, who think everything is fine, who are laughing now, who think they're great and life's great. The end of that perspective is going to be they're going to be brought low. But the ones who realized right now their need, they were the ones that were exalted and, honored. And that's kind of like Hannah epitomizes what Jesus taught about in the Beatitudes so much. And the way that's reflected in her song, I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, there almost does seem to be like this reversal as you're going through. You're seeing the back and forth. There's a lot of contrast between the way the world works and the way God works, and how it just reminds me of Isaiah, his ways are higher than our ways and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. And you see a little bit of that here in what she's saying.
Yeah. And her faith as well. We talked loads about her faith and this like amazing, great faith she's got. And I love it in verse 3 where she says like, hey, don't be talking proudly. Don't be arrogant. It could be like a snide remark, where she's kind of having a go at those people who are having a go at her. But then the next bit makes sense of it. The pride is misplaced because the people who are being proud didn't know what God wanted to do. And so they were boasting against her circumstances, but really they were kind of boasting against what God wanted to do. They were becoming opponents of God by their actions. But God knew what he was doing, and he ultimately is the judge. Like he will vindicate those who stand by him, which is going to be a theme. That idea of, you know, God will honor those who honor him and deny those who deny him crops up in a couple of chapters' time. I just think that kind of expresses her faith of like, yeah, don't boast because, you know, I thought God was going to do something and look, God did something. It just kind of all these same ingredients of her, like her faith, her honesty, her realization of her own attitudes. Yeah. There's the imagery here as well, like being raised up from the dust and lifting the needy from the ash heap. Like that's a recurring kind of prophetic image as well. I'm just thinking, Amber, you mentioned a song, the way that sort of imagery has worked its way into lots of worship songs as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even like, actually, that's interesting in verse 8. I didn't think about this before. So the poor are raised up from the dust. So you've got like the lowest of low in the dust, in the ash heap, are raised up and are then invited to sit with princes in a place of honor. And you wonder like what picture's being painted here. But then the next stanza of this is that the pillars of the earth are the Lord's and he's set the world on them. So you've kind of got God, the eternal, like head honcho king at the top, like holding court, and his princes below him, like the authorities he's established. And then Hannah's like, she was in the ash heap, but she's gone from there all the way up to being like seated. You know, this is close to being like at the right hand of God territory in terms of a partner with authority and honor and a place in God's story and stuff like that. So I like that as well.
It's funny. I'm looking at, so I'm reading from the CSB translation and Ryan's reading from the ESV. In verse 8, what we're talking about, it sounds like in a lot of translations it's ash heap, but the Hebrew word actually literally means pile of trash. Like it's like we think of ashes and we think like, yeah, it's dirty. But when you think of a pile of trash, you're thinking of like, you don't want to be anywhere near that. And it just conjures up the image of the Lord really caring about the lowly and caring about the stuff no one wants and the stuff nobody cares about. And the people who seem to not have anyone care about them, and he raises them up. And I think that's just a really beautiful image, because how often do we feel like when we're really alone and by ourselves, do we really think that we're not much of anything, that we're not very worthy? And it's clear here, I don't know, it feels clear to me that Hannah really does believe the things that she's saying. And it just, even as I'm reading this, I'm convicted. I'm like, okay, so I believe all these things in my mind because, that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm in Bible college, right? I'm supposed to believe these things, but how much do I really believe them in my heart and live them out through my actions and through my thoughts? Like, do I let anxiety take over me, or do I remember that the Lord raises the poor from the dust and the needy from the trash? Like, do I really believe these things, or do I just say them theologically and think that they're great things about God, but then in my life and in my decisions and in my actions, am I really living these the way Hannah did? Because it's clear that Hannah didn't believe these things now and not believe them before. Like, this has clearly been a part of her life from the beginning, and she's just proclaiming it as true now, but she very well could have said the same things earlier, because this is just the kind of God that we serve and that she knew. So it's just convicting reading it and thinking about it and saying, okay, well, I clearly need to meditate on this a little bit more.
Because her actions bear out, that's her perspective at the beginning. And that's the super challenging thing, because we can be like, oh yeah, I've got to believe, and I've got to, my faith's got to evidence itself somehow. Like, my life should look different if it's a life of faith. But our response so often when things are hard is a kind of, oh, I must be doing something wrong. Whereas Hannah persevered through years. I mean, how many kids does it say Penaniah has at this stage?
Pop quiz.
Naira's wife, and all her sons and daughters. I don't know if it says them, but she's got like a host of sons and daughters. So this has gone on for years. This is like, it's a faith that's endured, which is really cool as well. A persevering faith. All right, here's my top question then. So given that Israel at this point had never had a king, and talk of the Messiah is not really coming into the foreground, at least that language until we get to Isaiah, which is much later. What do you make of the end of this song? So we've got, the Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his Messiah.
Yeah. I wondered about that. It's actually a note that I have written down too, because this is the first place where that is brought up, and there is no king at this point. So, yeah, I mean, it could just be literally an anointing, like we've seen the Spirit of God come upon people, and so there's that element. Or it could refer to Christ. Depending on how you like to travel through scripture. Whether you like it to reveal itself progressively or if you allow it to jump back and forth.
Something I think that's interesting about that is one of the reasons why I like reading this Christologically, at least on one level, is because the thing that stuck out to me about actually there is no rock like our God is whenever I hear that, just rock, my mind is jumping to places where a rock has been very important and in what God has been doing with his people. And obviously in Exodus 17, we have the rock that Moses struck and then water poured out from it after the manna was given for the first time. And then Paul in 1 Corinthians remarks that rock was Christ. And so we have this kind of like this relation of rock to God, the rock being God and there being, no rock like our God. And then this point towards a Messiah and an anointed one that's coming out of this. And even thinking of like the water of life that's pouring out of the rock. I mean, I'm spitballing here things, but there's just this kind of language of what's happening, even with, obviously Samuel's the one who will anoint the Lord's anointed one and things like that. So there just seems to be something going on here with all of that that's kind of very forward pointing. And obviously God knows what's going on. He knows what's about to come.
Yeah.
It's like the early church and Paul looked back, all of these prophetic, like looking forward, as if each time the jigsaw of prophecy got filled in, that piece of the jigsaw may have something to say about a coming David or a coming Solomon or, a coming whoever.
Yeah.
But the picture that was being built up piece by piece was telling a bigger picture about the shape that Christ would be,
Yeah. I think it's interesting too that oftentimes people parallel Hannah's song to Mary's.
Oh yeah. I mean, structurally and the language usage is really similar. Yeah.
Yeah. So having that resemblance take place and Mary professing about Christ, there's also that connection too that was brought to my mind. But Ryan, I really like that point that you brought up. I never thought about it that way, but it's tie into the rock. I think I would agree with Ryan. I think I lean towards it having a Christological reference, but it's interesting because I went to, my undergrad was at a university that favored a more progressive revelation approach to biblical theology. And so I always like hesitate and bump up against my undergrad background as I read those things. I go, oh no, it's not talking about Christ because Christ, But I think I would, once I push past that wall, I think I would tend to agree with you.
I think the Mary thing you mentioned seals it for me. Like, it would seem like as Mary's trying to give voice to her own clear apprehension of the fact that this Jesus is the Messiah, she actually reaches back to Hannah's song to help express that thankfulness. It's like she's now seeing in herself the fulfillment of something that she saw in Samuel. So it just, if Mary thought it, I think I'll go with her.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So that's exciting. I like that little look forward. It's interesting again that just, the way that Christ is like a fulfillment of Moses, and then Samuel is portrayed as the second Moses, and so we're invited to kind of wonder as we, is this the fulfillment of the hope that leader Moses put out there? And we're like, no, he's good, but he's not the real deal. He's not the whole thing, So we're still left like wanting something more. And so I love that there's woven into it these little glances to the future, to the coming Messiah. And then you read verse 11, which is kind of like after all the exaltation, it's like coming back down to earth with just some basic housekeeping. Here's what's going on, but it's really important stuff. So Elkanah went home to Ramah. So Ramah is Samuel's hometown. And the boy, so he is, little, and he's ministering to the Lord in the presence of Eli the priest. And given what we know about Eli, this is like I don't know, it's like an awesome picture of Samuel just ministering to the Lord, but like there's this dark figure in the background. Right there, I need like a darker wall. There's this dark figure in the background of this corrupt Eli. So he's in the presence of the Lord, but also in the presence of Eli. And given how Eli's sons have gone, they're corrupt. We're wondering like, Hannah, I'm not sure if that was the best place to stick Samuel, actually. Like, I'm not sure what's going to happen here. So it's kind of teed it up for us.
Yeah. Sure. And then she doesn't have too much of a choice. I mean, part of the dedicating him to work at the temple would be that he works under Eli. And so there's almost a second layer of sacrifice there. The first layer would be that she, after weaning her child, dedicates him fully to the Lord and gets to visit him once a year, which I'm not a mom, but I can't imagine how hard that would be. But that second layer would be, and like the amount of radical trust that is required in the Lord to say, okay, I am entrusting you to him, but I'm also entrusting you to this priest that doesn't really seem like the most stand-up guy.
Yeah, it's that same faith again, isn't it? Of like, this doesn't look amazing, but I'm going to be faithful to God, and then that faith gets vindicated again. All right, Molly, you want to read a bit?
Yeah. Let me. I have I don't have my printed version with me. I'm on the phone. I know. Not my favorite. Verse 12, Eli's sons were scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord. Now it was the practice of the priests that whenever any of the people offered a sacrifice, the priest's servants would come with a 3-pronged fork in his hand while the meat was being boiled and would plunge the fork into the pan or kettle or cauldron or pot. This is very different than the song we just read.
Whatever. This is a hard left turn.
Whatever the fork brought up, the priest would take for himself. This is how they treated all the Israelites who came to Shiloh. But even before the fat was burned, the priest's servants would come and say to the person who was sacrificing, "Give the priest some meat to roast. He won't accept boiled meat from you, but only raw." If the person said to him, "Let the fat be burned first, and then take whatever you want," the servant would answer, "No, hand it over now. If you don't, I'll take it by force." The sin of the young men was very great in the Lord's sight, for they were treating the Lord's offering with contempt. I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, that's a good place to stop, because the next bit's the contrast.
Yeah,
so we've got Eli's sons, and we're going to... Actually, this whole section is a series of contrasts. It is like the writers inviting us to do a spot the difference. Like see the way Hophni and Phineas are going and see the way Samuel's going. Yeah.
You can see that too. It's like, it's super different from Hannah's prayer, but at the same time, it's actually not that different, because we're seeing the contrast of the wickedness that Hannah says that the Lord will bring down in her prayer, contrasted with the righteousness that Samuel displays in his in the way that he's going about his life and he's being raised. So you almost, like, reading it so close together, you begin to see that comparison, that Hannah's singing about all of this, and then it goes into a display of the differences that she just prayed, that we just read, and it's one of the benefits of reading big parts of scripture together. But it's like the narratival form of her prayer. You're seeing the differences.
I like, there's a little bit of a joke at the beginning of verse 12. But are you reading the NIV, Molly?
Yes.
So what did yours say, just that first sentence of verse 12?
They were scoundrels.
Scoundrels. Yeah. Which is right. I've got ESV, which says worthless men. But the literal kind of syntax of this is, now the sons of Eli, sons of Belial. So like sons of wickedness.
Yeah.
And so we're invited to make a judgment call about Eli here. Eli had some sons. They were called sons of Eli? No, sons of wickedness. Wait, so whose sons are they? The wicked one. Well, I thought you said it was Eli. Yeah, the wicked one. You know, it's like there's an equivocation here between Eli and wickedness, which is just really interesting to kick off this section. And then, I mean, we need to keep in our head some of these observations, because we're going to see them contrast with Samuel. Because one of the things about Samuel is, like, he hears from the Lord, he sees the Lord, he's with the Lord, he's in his presence, all this relational stuff. The first thing we learn about these guys is they're wicked and they do not know the Lord. Like they don't have a relationship. I think one translation says, literally it does mean they don't know the Lord, but is they had no regard for the Lord. Like no respect, no basis of relationship, no relational equity with the Lord. And then they're being meanies. This is interesting because it says the custom of the priests. So it's like they're trying to alter a tradition to their own advantage here. And you know, earlier on I could smell someone barbecuing meat outside. I gotta say, like, boiled meat versus roasted meat, you can totally see where they were coming from. But the idea was that the Lord got the best. That's the whole point of it. And so that's really what's going on, is this kind of, well, that's better than what we get, so why don't we give the Lord the inferior portion, and why don't we take the superior part of this? And it just shows the way that they're so confused in their thinking. I'm not even sure what that's like giving someone a gift and then being like, yeah, enjoy your gift, but actually I'm going to take the gift back, but I'm going to let you play with the box it came in. So, you know, you're like, thanks, that's great, I feel really honored by you. It's just a lot of confusion going on here. And then they're threatening people. It's interesting because it pictures it almost like a pivotal time, like the traditions and customs are being eroded. So people are not so used to being challenged yet that they just go with what Hophni and Phineas are saying. And like Eli's family is this dominant family in Israel. You know, they don't have a king. So in terms of like a class system or something like that, you know, Eli's family are the top of the tree. but their ways are not yet established. So people are like, no, that's not what the Lord said to do. So they are pushing back. But yeah, they don't want to listen, don't want to do it.
Mhm.
Which is interesting, when the general populace you're supposed to be leading seem to know more about honoring the Lord than the priests who are supposed to be teaching them.
Yeah.
Things have gone pretty wrong here.
Yeah. And just to make like we were saying, like this is a very much like these couple chapters are very much like a spot the difference that the author's inviting us into, just to show where those differences are specifically, and like the way Hannah is approaching the temple is like she goes and she is fully giving her best. In fact, the gift that is given to her from her already giving the Lord her best of like prayers and faithfulness to visit the temple and everything is this son, and she gives him up totally for the Lord. And here we have, these sons who are supposed to be the priests and the ones that are like the intermediaries for these people and the Lord, and they're like taking the best off the top for themselves. And then like there's no humility within them on how they approach these things, versus Hannah's like complete and utter humility even before Eli, who is like the father of these wicked men and raised them to be this wicked, and yet she still humbles herself before them. Like I mean, it's just so night and day like difference in the way that these people are handling the Lord. And yeah.
All right, I'm going to read the next bit, which means I get the good bit. Haha. So verse 18, Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy clothed with a linen ephod, and his mother used to make for him a little robe and take it to him each year when she went up with her husband to offer the yearly sacrifice. Then Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife and say, "May the Lord give you children by this woman for the petition she asked of the Lord." So then they would return to their home. Indeed, the Lord visited Hannah, and she conceived and bore 3 sons and 2 daughters. And the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. Okay, now we've got to start some spot the difference. This is the last thing we learn about Hannah and Elkanah, which is, both Elkanah and Hannah, are portrayed as really awesome figures. But it continues right through to the end of their story. There's not many people in Scripture who start well and finish well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a rarity. So here's Elkanah still going every year to sacrifice, just like faithful in what he's supposed to be doing, faithful in serving the Lord, and Hannah too. And Hannah still caring about Samuel, even though she's distant. She obviously still considers Samuel her son, hers to care for, but not in an interfering way. Like she's able to like open-handedly give him to the Lord, but still love him and care for him.
Yeah, I think it's cool because you do get a little bit of that happy ending. Because you see that the Lord paid attention to Hannah's need, and she conceived and gave birth to 3 sons and 2 daughters. So obviously we don't serve the Lord to get stuff out of him, because that's not really serving anybody. But the Lord did see her need, and he saw her sacrifice, and the Lord always honors our sacrifice and honors our devotion to him. That always looks different from person to person. But in Hannah's case, it looked like more kids, which I think is the happy ending we don't get much of in Scripture, especially in this time. But I particularly am struck by the end of that section, the end of verse 21. Meanwhile, the boy Samuel grew up in the presence of the Lord. And Molly pointed out that Hannah's prayer is a lot similar to Mary's prayer / song. And shortly after Mary's prayer in Luke 2:40, referring to Jesus, you're seeing the boy Jesus grew up and became strong, filled with wisdom, and God's grace was on him. And it just obviously, and speaking Christologically, we know Jesus fulfills David and David's kingship, and we don't always think that Jesus fulfills Samuel's role as well. But this connection and similar verbiage you can see here from 1 Samuel 2 and Luke 2, the growing up in the presence of the Lord. Is just you do see that the hope that Samuel begins to bring into the story was just a foretaste of the hope that Jesus brought in the gospel. So I think that's a glimmer of hope that we see there in that connection. I think is really really neat.
Yeah. It's interesting as well, like some of the little details about how Eli's never quite accurate with things. Like Hannah's petition was not to have lots of sons and daughters. Her petition was specifically, if you will give me one son. She'd already had her petition, but Eli assumes that, like every other woman, she wants further blessing. Is it just an interesting, I don't know, when you see a detail that's not quite there, not quite right, like, what's going on with that?
Yeah.
I
think it also...
Yeah. Oh, go on, Molly.
Sorry. No, I think it just to continue on to what Amber was saying, I think it just speaks to the Lord's character. I'm even reminded of Ephesians 3, like she comes and asks for a son, and he is gracious to like give abundantly more than she asks or imagines, and opens her womb and provides like a family, and her ability to step into that maternal role that she was longing for. Just as a caveat to remind all of us about God's character in that way.
Yeah. It's really good.
One of the interesting things I was reading pointed out that Hophni, Phinehas, and Samuel all start this story not knowing the Lord. Hophni and Phinehas, throughout the story, never know the Lord. Whereas Samuel really quickly and actually continuously is portrayed as being next to God. And so, like we don't learn too many details about this boy at this stage, but this phrase, that Samuel grew in the presence of the Lord, that the Hebrew there, like in the presence of the Lord, is literally with Yahweh. It's the language that's used of Moses, saying Moses was with Yahweh when he was at the top of the mountain receiving the 10 Commandments. And so it's interesting because Samuel's kind of fulfilling this like Moses prophet figure, where Moses said, like, there's going to be another prophet, like a national leader who will come after me. But he's also elevating, like Moses got to go up and be with Yahweh on the top of the mountain. Samuel grows up habitually with Yahweh. So it's like an even greater than experience relationally than even Moses had. And so it's one of the things I'm sort of noticing about Samuel, reading it through afresh, that I've not really noticed before, is the emphasis on just how deep Samuel's relationship with Yahweh was.
Yeah.
It keeps being pointed at throughout the story. So I like that part. All right, can we read some more?
Yeah.
Which I think means, Amber, you're up.
All right. In verse 22, we flop back over to Eli. Now, Eli was very old. He heard about everything his sons were doing to all Israel and how they were sleeping with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. He said to them, "Why are you doing these things? I have heard about your evil actions from all these people. No, my sons, the news I hear the Lord's people spreading is not good. If one person sins against another, God can intercede for him. But if a person sins against the Lord, who can intercede for him?" But they would not listen to their father, since the Lord intended to kill them. By contrast, the boy Samuel grew up in nature and in favor with the Lord and with people. Should I keep going?
We should say something about that bit, because the next bit's a massive long bit. And then we'll
That
forget.
doesn't, if that
what we read.
passage doesn't shock you, you're just what? Because you know a little bit what's happening from earlier, but
Yeah,
then you hear even more. And I think it's interesting that Eli is so unaware of what his sons are doing that it's twice, 2 times, like right in a row, he is saying, people have told me these things are happening. Then he says, people have told me these things are, I mean, it's twice. You see that. And it's just like, he's clearly so disconnected and checked out. And we kind of see that in chapter 1. If you'll remember, we talked a lot about how he just seemed kind of checked out when he had no idea what Hannah was praying and then kind of just spoke too soon.
yeah,
You can kind of see that here too, where he's like, we don't really get the sense that he's the one who's saying, hey, I caught you. That's not okay. It's like, oh, I guess people are telling me you're doing these things and that's not good. I don't know. It just feels unfortunate that he's not really that aware, or if he's aware but just doesn't do anything until people come to him. Either way, it just seems not that great of
his lack of
parent, let alone
awareness.
priest.
I think his lack of awareness, the author continues to emphasize, because the next time we see him, he's blind, and then the next time after that, it's kind of like so blind he can't even see his hand in front of his face. But the blindness is a metaphor for his inability to discern what's going on.
Yeah.
It's like God keeps meeting Eli and warning him, but instead of his response being to sort of lift himself out of, the injustice or apathy or whatever, stuff the problem was, he actually continues this decline. There's something tragic about that you just, even though God himself is sending you a prophet and warning you by name, you're still like spiraling downwards. It's pretty bad.
Which is horribly ironic due to what we'll find out, where Samuel is like hearing the voice of the Lord, but this is the first time he's like hearing the voice of the Lord in this way. So he keeps running back to Eli like, oh, Eli, did you say something? And he's like, no, you're going crazy. Go back to bed.
Yeah.
And then finally it's like the third time or whatever. And Eli's like, oh, hey, that's God. He's trying to speak to you. Go back and lie down. Yeah. And if he speaks to you again, then answer him.
So glad our Lord is patient.
So he has discernment for what the Lord's doing in Samuel, but he has no clue what God's trying to do in his own life.
And even then, like the fact that he doesn't know what's going on the first few times suggests that the discernment he's got for what is going on is that the penny is dropping very slowly.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't seem to occur to him quickly that, oh, God might speak to someone.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, no, he doesn't really have a box for that. So he's just like, go back to bed, leave me alone. Yeah. I also like the way he's portrayed. So this is his first rebuke of his sons recorded. And the first thing we're told to introduce us to this section is he's really old. So you got to like, is the author trying to say like, yeah, he'd kind of missed the boat as a parent and as a leader. Just these little details are really interesting as they color in the picture for us.
Yeah.
And actually, go on.
I was just going to say, just to solidify even more the thing that Amber said before about how the connection between Samuel and Jesus and the language there. In verse 26.
Oh yeah, this is great.
Samuel continued to grow both in stature and in favor with the Lord and also with man. And in Luke 2:52, we have, and Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man.
Yeah.
And so more parallel language there just to confirm the kind of like what Samuel's role is also still pointing forward to in greater reality.
Yeah. And the way that Luke there is, so I'm applying what I've been noticing about Samuel's with the Lord emphasis, and thinking, what's Luke trying to point at when he references that? And before, my mind would have gone to, Jesus is like this awesome prophet leader. He's going to restore the true word of what God has to say to his people. And he is all of that. But actually, at this point in the narrative, Samuel hasn't really done any of that. The thing that's being bragged on for Samuel right now is the fact that he just is with the Lord.
Hmm.
So it's interesting. I think Luke probably has a bigger picture in mind as well, but that he would choose this as his reference point is really interesting. Another contrast is, where it says the sons were sleeping with the women who served at the entrance to the tent of meeting. And so this isn't just like, oh man, Hophni and Phinehas, what are they doing wrong now? I mean, it is wrong, so it is that. But also, like having prostitutes who served at the temple, it was a total normal pagan thing to do.
Yeah.
To have kind of, it's like sex cult prostitutes who worked in the temple of various gods. And so it become, I mean, this is, it's immoral, but beyond even just being immoral, it's also Hophni and Phinehas, as they are shaping what religion looks like in Israel, are copying what the world does.
Yeah.
And God has just spent all of Leviticus and Deuteronomy, like we've literally, if we're reading through our Bible, just spent ages reading it about how you are to be different. You're not to be like all the other nations. I am not a God like the rest of those gods, and we're going to do stuff differently. And God's so zealous to show how different he is. And then you got here a couple of dudes who just keep copying what everyone else does. So you can imagine how frustrating this is to God's plan, All right.
I can keep going.
Yeah, deep breath. Here we go. Big, long paragraph.
All right. A man of God came to Eli and said to him, this is verse 27, "This is what the Lord says. Didn't I reveal myself to your forefathers' family when they were in Egypt and belonged to Pharaoh's palace? Out of all the tribes of Israel, I chose your house to be my priests, to offer sacrifices on my altar, to burn incense, and to wear an ephod in my presence. I also gave your forefathers' family, all the Israelite fire offerings. Why then do all of you despise my sacrifices and offerings that I require at the place of worship? You have honored your sons more than me by making yourselves fat with the best part of all the offerings of my people Israel. Therefore, this is the declaration of the Lord, the God of Israel. I did say that your family and your forefathers' family would walk before me forever. But now, this is the Lord's declaration. No longer. For those who honor me, I will honor, but those who despise me will be disgraced. Look, the days are coming when I will cut off your strength and the strength of your forefathers' house, so that none in your family will reach old age. You will see distress in the place of worship, in spite of all that is good in Israel, and no one in your family will ever reach old age. Any man from your family I do not cut off from my altar will bring grief and sadness to you. All your descendants will die violently." Sheesh. "This will be a sign that will come to you concerning your two sons, Hophni and Phinehas. Both of them will die on the same day. Then I will raise up a faithful priest for myself. He will do whatever is in my heart and mind. I will establish a lasting dynasty for him, and he will walk before my anointed one for all time. Anyone who is left in your family will come and bow down to him for a piece of silver or a loaf of bread. He will say, 'Please appoint me to some priestly office so I can have a piece of bread to eat.'"
Yeah, so when someone comes up to you on a Sikh night with a bit of paper and is like, "Oh, I think God gave me a word for you," this is not what you want.
Geez, definitely not.
It does not get worse than this. This is pretty bad. Man, I mean, it's this picture of they have risen to be the most influential priestly dynasty, and they're going to be brought. It's almost like the contrasts in Hannah's prayer. They're going to be brought to the opposite. They're going to be dishonored. They're going to be stripped of influence. The way that it emphasizes like there'll be no old man, because in that culture it was the elders who sat in judgment, who made community decisions. The ones who were most influential were the elders. So saying of this family, like, you're not going to have any old people, is basically saying you're going to be stripped of influence. Like, I don't want your voice to be heard anymore. But then there's some kind of like dagger in the heart, kind of, you honor your sons more than me, is Yeah, it's pretty harsh. But it's harsh, but it's interesting because when the ark gets taken in a couple, so this will be next week, a couple of chapters time, and Eli is sat outside the town and they bring back the report. They say, oh, you know, the Philistines defeated Israel, loads of people died, your sons are dead. And it's like, in terms of reactions from Eli, we get like nothing, nothing, nothing. Your sons are dead, nothing. Oh, and the ark of the Lord's been taken. And at that, he's like shocked. And so I know it's a really interesting one for me that the way that the writer's portraying Samuel, I would have expected, having pointed out, you honor your sons more than me, that maybe later on, Eli would have been really hurt by the fact that his sons were dead, but, you know, be less fussed that the ark was taken. But actually, he's portrayed the other way around. So it makes me wonder, you know, does this signal a change in Eli's relationship to thinking about God and the ark? Or does it signal a change in his relationship and thinking about his sons? Maybe his sons continue in their positions of privilege, but become estranged, and he actually starts to despise and hate them, which would fit a biblical pattern of, you know, people who fail to lead well often end up becoming angry and embittered towards the people they failed to lead. So it could be a bit of both. It's an interesting contrast there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's almost like we don't really get a lot of Eli's response to this. Like, it doesn't say, and then Eli said, or and then Eli did. You just don't see that. It's just the end. Next, like, just like that, you know, if it were a movie, it's like that scene ends and then the next scene begins, and you're like, well, wait, what did he say? What did he think about this? Like, this is no, like you said, Richard, this is no small thing. So you almost have to, pick up those small pieces of when Eli's talked about later and see if there's maybe a thread to follow of how he's acting now, because this is evidently before these other events that take place. Yeah.
It's like Eli's silence in these chapters is deafening, right? And it's
in light of all of his wordiness before.
Well, I don't know. We'll have to see if we have time to do a bit of chapter 3 here, because it's so good, chapter 3. But, you know, Samuel is responding to the Lord, and the Lord speaks to him, and he speaks and listens and acts. And, you know, there's all this responsiveness. And really, Eli's got two main responses. One is in the next chapter when he hears from Samuel about what has been proclaimed over the fall of his line. He says, "It's the Lord, let him do what seems good to him." Now, that could be like an honest, genuine, you know, like, oh, yeah, well, you know, God's God. Like, but it kind of reads to me a little bit like a, whatever.
Yeah.
Kind of. And then the next reaction is that he falls off a log and dies. Like, these are not, these are not great lines in a play. You know, what's your part in a play? Oh, you're just gonna like say whatever when someone drops a bomb, and then you're gonna react by dying. So it just speaks to Eli's impotence. He's powerless. It seems like he lacks discernment, so we see that portrayed, but he lacks any ability to do anything, to react, to respond. And so, he just epitomizes the person who's, I mean, it's like that classic image that people have used in Sunday school, you know, like any dead fish can be carried along by the river. It takes a live one to swim upstream. You know, it's that he's just being carried along by currents that he's actually being called to shape, but seems powerless to do anything about. And so it's a tragic lack of leadership.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think? It's 7:30. Do we start with chapter 3 next week?
I say let's leave everyone in suspense, and we'll talk about chapter 3 next week.
Chapter 3 is really good. So that will be really good to look forward to.
Yeah, with fresh minds, I would agree.
Yes, fresh minds and adrenaline energy.
Yes. Energy.
And maybe even a Tim Reed, who, you know, you never know,
Yeah.
he made it. So he did actually, he sent me a picture. I
Uh-huh.
Oh my
got
goodness.
Florida.
Oh, there we go.
Thanks, Tim.
Good for him.
That's so funny. Richard,
Yeah.
did we have any responses on any of the platforms? Any questions or anything?
No, we have not had any so far, and so I think Wednesday might be quite a high point for people doing their community things.
Okay.
And so I did get a couple of emails from people who are going to. They said, "Oh yeah, I really enjoyed it. I'm going to watch it later." And so
Watching
just
it
so
later.
you guys know, we will keep an eye on the comments. So if you want to share something or ask a question, please do, because we'd love next week to pick that up and interact with what other people have been noticing and seeing as well.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Okay.
Great.
Molly.
Come back for more.
Yes. Do you want to pray?
Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, Father, we're just really thankful for your word. Thank you that it's beautiful, it's prophetic, it's encouraging, it's uplifting, and it's also just a really good story. Yeah, I'm just captivated by the intensity of this story tonight, and I'm just thankful for the ways in which you can teach us and guide us and encourage us, even in the midst of a story written so long ago, God, that you can even like hold up these characters to like a mirror to our own heart and search our own hearts if we've got any of these qualities in us. God, would you just like help cleanse and purify those aspects of us? God, we want to be people that are discerning, people that are filled with humility and submission to you, Father. So I'm just I'm just reminded of the ways in which Eli and his sons were not, and we just hope and pray that we would learn from their character flaws and that we would be submitted fully and humbly to you, God, like Hannah is, seeking you desperately in prayer and coming before you with all humility and surrendering our own will that yours might be done. So thank you for your encouragement, your word. Thank you for these awesome people, for Amber and Ryan and Richard and Tim. We'll even throw you in there, even though you didn't get to join us. We're just thankful for this team that gets to dive in and nerd out on the scriptures and also be encouraged and encourage our community in the scriptures as well. Amen.
Amen. All right. God bless. Goodbye, everyone. Have
We love you
a
all.
great week. Look forward to gathering with you and seeing you on Sunday.
Yes.